Alright, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to this week's limited level up. So, today's episode is going to be a bit of a split episode, actually. I've got two topics that I really want to cover. First topic is going to be my updated stance on my approach to the format. I've had a very, very successful week, actually. My most successful of the formats. There was like a span of 10 drafts I had this week, where within that 10 drafts, I had like a 70% win rate in best of one. I feel like I've really found a strategy, a way I like to approach the format that is pretty replicable and pretty successful. So, want to share that, of course, with all y'all today. And then the second topic is something kind of fun, but I also think something that is good for your win rate too to know about. So we're going to be talking about 5 interesting, weird Buildaround rares, because there's actually a pretty hefty number of Buildaround rares in this set. And some of them are really strange, so I'm going to deep dive on what makes them tick, when you want to take them, how to make them good, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think that's going to be kind of fun. We've got the business up front for the first topic and party in the back for the second, so let's jump in. Okay, so starting with my updated take on how I'm approaching this format. Last week, we did a deep dive on drafting blue-black control in this format. And I mentioned on that episode how I felt that the format was really shifting towards being about value, building your decks in a way where you're not running out of action, trying to plan for the late game. It's pretty difficult to run your opponent over in this format. Like, there's just not... The cheap creatures don't really lend themselves to that for the most part. And so most games in this format, I find, come down to grinding. And of course, blue-black is a really good deck at doing that. That's why I was drafting it a lot last week. This week, I felt very similar. I felt that the games that I have lost were because I got outvalued, I ran out of cards. Very few times, I can count on one hand the times I feel like I lost because I got run over. I mean, mana screw, that maybe counts, but I'm not counting my mana screw games. The games where I was actually doing things, affecting the board, casting spells on time, keeping pace with the opponent, I can count on one hand the times when my opponent had a good aggro start that I couldn't combat. And so I started thinking like, okay, well, if the problem I'm trying to solve for is how do I build my deck in a way where I'm not going to get outvalued and I have inevitability, the easy answer is just, well, make sure that all of your cards, or almost all your cards, generate value somehow. Put you up a card. Put you up a piece of material, something that makes a lander token. I'm counting those kind of cards too. In a lot of other formats, if I identified, okay, value is good, you want 2-for-1s, you want things that put you up cards, there's some sort of hypothetical limit there often, because a lot of times the cards that put you up cards are blue draw spells, they're cards that don't directly affect the board, so there's somewhat of a limit, right, to like how many grindy cards you can have. I think in this format, one of the things I realized is that so many of the card advantage cards are board affecting cards as well. So you've got stuff like Virus Beetle, for example. You've got stuff like Codecracker Hound, the 3-mana blue uncommon warp creature that draws you cards. You've got stuff like Faller's Faithful, which is the black 3-1 uncommon, comes in, kills one of your creatures, you draw 2 cards. I mean, you can target your opponent's things too with this. I don't do it very often, but it is a legal mode of the card. You've got stuff like Monolith Circuit Feeder in the 6-drop slot, even stuff like Nebula Dragon, which is a card we'll talk about in a minute. I've been playing quite a lot lately. The 7-mana 4/4 flyer comes in, draws 3. So a lot of your card advantage cards are also board affecting cards, which means that there's not as much of an upper limit on 2-for-1 grindy stuff. I mean, even Cryogen Relic, which is essentially just a draw spell, it does affect the board too, right? Like keeps one of your opponent's creatures tapped, gains you a little bit of life. And so in a different format where the card advantage is more in the form of raw card draw, things that don't affect the board, you might have to have a little bit of a balance and be like, okay, here's my 5-ish cards that generate value. Here are my cards that affect the board. I'm hoping to draw an even mix of those. Basically, in other formats, you might need to exercise a bit of restraint as far as how value-packed your deck is. I don't think that's the case in this format, and I really, limit tested this. When I have a thought of, well, this thing is good in this format, I like to take it to its extreme. And so that's what I kind of did. I went okay, well, what if I just take every single card that generates value, is a 2-for-1, makes a lander token, or is a removal spell, right? Those are kind of the two big camps of cards that my decks have been filled with this week. Any other card, for me to be happy with it, has to be like a specific synergy piece, or, there's some rares and uncommons that don't necessarily fit into one of those two camps. But I really attribute my success this week to drafting with this philosophy of, okay, prioritize removal highly, prioritize value highly, and figure out the rest later. Everything else is kind of secondary. Now, of course, one thing to think about here is that certain colors are going to lend themselves to drafting with this philosophy more than other colors. I think that blue and black are the best at doing this kind of thing. Obviously blue and black, a lot of their good cards are just removal spells and card advantage. It's part of why I think blue-black is one of the best decks in this format, it just gets all that stuff naturally. But I think red also does a pretty good job of filling that role. And so I don't necessarily recommend this. This is just my experience. This is just what I've had success with. But I've sort of been avoiding green and white in favor of drafting the Grixis colors. I'm kind of fully Grixis build at this point. Not to say, I open an Ouroboros, I'm going to take it, of course. I opened the white's Wrath, I'm going to take that, of course. But as far as commons and uncommons go, I will put a heavy preference on a black, red, or blue common or uncommon compared to a white or green one. And to be clear, I'm not trying to talk down green or white. Like, if you've had great success with green and white in this format, that's great. I've had good success with green too, more at the beginning of the format than in the last week or two. This is just a way to approach the format, right? Like, if you are going to try to replicate what I'm talking about here, I would suggest staying in the Grixis colors, because that's where the density of the cards you're looking for kind of lie. And I've been pretty happy being in any of the color pairs as my base. Blue-black is ideal, but black-red is a good base too. Blue-red is a good base for this kind of thing. Red-black in particular is kind of interesting, because at the beginning of the format, I was drafting that deck more as an aggressive deck, right? The typical red-black limited deck that's kind of aggressive and maybe has some grindy elements to it. But the red creatures, they actually don't attack all that well, and the black creatures definitely don't attack very well. So I've been building red-black these days a little more like as if it was a blue-black deck strategically. I'm also pretty happy to splash in these decks, blue-black splash red, black-red splash blue. I kind of run all of the color combinations and all the splash combinations. And I think that it's really important that any three of these color pairs are viable for this strategy, because with any consistent and replicable limited strategy, I think you need some amount of that. You need some amount of like, well, if my two colors that I prefer aren't open, I want to have a tertiary color. I want to have kind of a backup color that I'm happy leaning on if, in this example, blue and black aren't super open. And I think red, like I mentioned, does that just fine. Okay, so if you would like to jump into your next draft and try drafting kind of like I've been drafting this week, I want to talk about some specifics. We'll get into some individual cards, get into where I'm prioritizing certain cards. So starting with the commons here, there are 3 commons that I take super highly, and I'm happy with multiples. I'm happy with 3 or 4 of each of these. They are in order here: Cryogen Relic, Virus Beetle, and Orbital Plunge. So Cryogen Relic, of course, the blue cantripping artifact. Virus Beetle, 2-mana 1/1. The opponent discards a card. And Orbital Plunge, the red, deal 6 and make a lander token. All 3 of these generate value just by casting them. They don't need anything to work with them. You don't need anything special. If you do have artifact synergies, sacrifice synergies, void synergies, yeah, of course they get better, and you often will have those cards. But just want to point these cards out as great on rate, generate value without any work. All 3 of these cards also play really nicely with a card that I've just been going up and up and up on this week, Slag Drill Scrapper. So this is the single red mana 1/2 artifact creature. You can pay 2, sack an artifact or a land to draw a card. So obviously works very well with the Relic, works very well with the Beetle. You can sack the lander from the Orbital Plunge. The reason I've liked this card is it's a 1 mana card that, as long as you've built your deck right, you've got all these value generating things, your opponent has to answer your Slag Drill Scrapper. I've had a lot of games where I've just gone Scrapper on 1, Beetle on 2, play a 3-drop, whatever it is, Orbital Plunge your 4-drop. Now you're down a card from the Virus Beetle. I can sack my Beetle, and the token I made from Orbital Plunge should be up 2 cards. Of course, works very well with Cryogen Relic. You're sacking Cryogen Relic to draw 2 cards off of it. There's also Melded Moxite, which is a card I like a lot. It's not quite as good as Relic or Beetle or Plunge, but I take it kind of just below that. This is the 2-mana artifact that comes in, you can discard a card, you draw 2, and then you can sack it for 3 mana, make a robot token. You can sack Moxite to Scrapper, also Nutrient Block, the single mana artifact that when it's put in the grave, you draw a card. That works with Scrapper too. And so yeah, sometimes I do end up a little bit light on the card advantage front, and Scrapper is a card advantage engine that you can pick up almost for free. Right? And I'm pretty happy as long as I've got, 11-ish things that I'm happy to sacrifice it. I'm happy playing 2. I played 3 in my last deck. That last deck went 6/3. So it was pretty strong there. I had just a bunch of these cantrippy artifacts we've been talking about. I'll put that deck up on screen right here if you want to take a look at it to see what's going on. But yeah, I would just say if you're not someone who's been playing Slag Drill Scrapper, I would value this card a little bit higher. I mean, value higher maybe isn't the right way to put it, because again, you don't have to take it very highly, but consider including it in your deck a little more often than you are now. Another creature I take pretty highly, and this is one of the few cards that doesn't fall into the camp of either a removal spell or a value generating card, Zookeeper Mechan, which is the red 1/3 common artifact creature mana dork, taps to add a red mana. So this one's interesting because I take it pretty highly in some decks, but not in others. Basically, the way I think about it is the more card draw you have, the more you want Zookeeper Mechan, the more removal you have, the more you don't want this card, or you want to deprioritize it. The idea being, when your deck is card draw heavy, you really appreciate more mana to be able to draw your cards, cast the card in the same turn as you drew a card, just be able to dump your hand after you've drawn a bunch of cards. But you don't really want to pair this with removal spells as badly, because if you have Zookeeper Mechan in a hand of removal spells, well, you're controlling the game, sure, but you're not really progressing it in any ways, right? This Mechan doesn't attack very well. It's much better to pair your pile of removal spells with high-powered creatures if you're going down that path. Not to say I'm not going to play Mechan in a deck that doesn't have, a bunch of card draw or anything like that. Sometimes I will play it, but I have been in spots where, let's just say in pack 3, I'm like, okay, my deck is lacking a little bit of card flow, a little bit of card advantage. I don't want the Mechan that much. I'm actually going to take Moxite here, the red discard a card, draw a card artifact. Not a pick I would have made 2 weeks ago, but as I've been drafting these decks more and more, the more I go, yeah, yes, Mechan is a better card, but my deck just needs the card flow a little bit more, needs the card filtering aspect. I need to be able to see more cards. It doesn't really want to ramp spell that badly, because I've just got a bunch of removal spells, and ramping into removal isn't exactly a productive thing to do. Then we've got Perigee Beckoner, which is the 5-mana 4/5 in black that has Warp for 2 mana, and when it comes in, something gets +2/+0, and when that thing would die, return to the battlefield under its owner's control. So this card does not inherently grant you value whenever you cast it, but I kind of count it as granting you value as long as your deck has enough ways to sacrifice cards, right? So if you can cast this, target your Virus Beetle, sack it right away to like an Embrace Oblivion or something, the single mana sack a thing, kill a thing, then yeah, your Beckoner can kind of fill in that value slot. It's a good card in general, and it's not too difficult to find some sort of use for it in my deck. So yeah, it's one that I take reasonably highly, around that like Zookeeper Mechan Moxite range. And then I just want to quickly go through a bunch of card advantage cards that I think are awesome. So 2 really premium ones at uncommon. Fell Graveship. This is the 3-mana spacecraft that has flying lifelink. When it enters, you return a creature or spacecraft from your graveyard to your hand. Great card. Similarly great card, Codecracker Hound. This is the 3-mana Warp Dog. We've also got Uthros Scanship. Is the 4-mana flying 4/4 that when it enters, draw 2 cards, then discard a card. We've got Selfcraft Mechan, which is the blue common 3/4. Sack an artifact when it comes in, draw a card, put a counter on something. Another card that's awesome with, Perigee Beckoner, but also that collection of cards I was talking about, the Virus Beetle, the Moxite, the Cryogen Relic, Orbital Plunge, like all those cards to play super, super nicely with Selfcraft Mechan. There are 3 uncommon draw 3s that I take pretty highly. So these are Cerebral Download, the blue instant Surveil X or X number of artifacts you control, then draw 3 cards. All Fate Scroll, which is the mana rock that can tap, draw a bunch of cards. And Survey Mechan, which is the 4-mana 1/3 hexproof flyer that deals 3 to something, you gain 3, draw 3 cards. 10 cost activation, but it's cheaper for each differently named lands you control. So yeah, you can have, if you have one of these cards in your opening hand, one of these draw 3s, you can kind of just plan your entire game around that, where it's like, okay, I'm just going to go trade, kill your stuff, be up 3 cards at the end of the day, and that's going to win a lot of games. Cerebral Download is the one that needs the least work, of course. You just cast it, it's draw 3. All Fate Scroll and Survey Mechan, of course, need you to have some lands, but I think both of them are kind of okay on just 3 differently named lands in the battlefield. Like if you have like a Command Bridge and 2 basics, you draw 3 cards at the All Fate Scroll, and the Mechan costs 7 mana to activate. I think those are okay. And because you really want to be on the lookout for these differently named lands, I've started to take the shock lands a little bit higher. I've started to take some of the bonus sheet cards a little bit higher. I'm not going to take lands that I don't really want or have a use for before I have a scroll or a Survey Mechan, but when I do, I tend to take, for example, like the first Breeding Pool pretty highly, or just like if I don't have a Command Bridge for, that's the common one, I'll take that pretty highly. Also, when you take random shock lands like a Breeding Pool, maybe that means you get to play a Biomechan Engineer, the blue-green gold card. So yeah, just another thing I'm thinking about when drafting these decks, just if you can speculate on a land here or there, or one of the good colorless ones, so you play that as an 18th land, like one of the bonus sheet cards that are colorless, like a Mutavault or a Inkmoth Nexus, something like that. I take those pretty highly. Talked about this last week when talking about blue-black control, but there's 2 kind of interesting card advantage cards here. Voidforge Titan and Hymn of the Faller. Both of these need you to trigger Void for them to be good. So this is the 5-mana 5/4 in black that at the end step, if Void is triggered, you draw a card and lose a life. Hymn of the Faller is the 2-mana sorcery that you surveil 1, draw a card, lose a life. but if Void was triggered, you draw 2 cards instead. So these cards range from really quite bad to really quite good, and if you're prioritizing all the cards I've been talking about, so the Cryoderilicks and the Orbital Plunges, the Lander tokens, and Moxite, Nutrient Block, the 1-drop, the red 1-drop that sacks artifacts and lands draw cards, like that's another bonus of that card, is that it gives you Void on command pretty often. If you have those cards and prioritizing them where I'm prioritizing them, you can take Void Forge Titan and Hymn of the Faller as good card advantage cards. Can't really do that if you don't have a density of them, though. Last thing to talk about here, I want to talk about Nebula Dragon and Pinnacle Killship. So, Pinnacle Killship, this is the 7-mana common 7/7 flyer, comes in, deals 10 damage to something, the spacecraft. Last week I talked about how when you have spacecraft in these controlling decks, you really need to keep your creature count relatively high, something in like the 13-14 range. But I've run into a lot of spots where I'm like, man, I really like top end card, and Pinnacle Killship would be fine, but my creature count, maybe I'm late pack 3, my creature count is not high enough for me to comfortably play this Killship. So instead, I'll take another 7-drop that you get pretty late, which is Nebula Dragon. This is the 7-mana red creature, 4/4 flyer, comes in, deals 3 to any target. I've been playing a lot of Nebula Dragon. I splashed this as my only red card in a blue-black trophy that I had the other day. I just wanted another top-end card. I generally prefer Killship if I have the creature count, but it's really nice that there's an easy-to-pick-up common finisher that also generates value, that also counts as a removal spell, that you can play in your low creature count decks too. Like this is a fine splash. Like the reason I splashed it in that blue-black deck I was just talking about was because it was like, okay, hey, like I need a way to close the game. I also would like a top-end card. I've just got a bunch of card draw and removal spells here. Nebula Dragon kind of fits the bill. I also have ways to recur it. Maybe I have a Fell Grab Ship or something. So, kind of a little bit of synergy in there too. But yeah, just like the Scrapper, Nebula Dragon has been a card that's been going up and up and up for me. It's pretty rare that I have a red deck these days that doesn't have at least 1 copy, and sometimes I'll play 2. And that's basically going to do it for my updated takes on the format. Hopefully you're able to put some of these things into practice. Before we get into our next section, talking about some cool Buildarounds, I do want to shout out the Patreon, patreon.com/limitedlevelups. That's the #1 place you can go if you want to support the show, or if you want some awesome benefits that come along with being a patron. Those benefits range from deck tech help and draft log review help, all the way up to coaching. Links to that Patreon are in the YouTube description and the podcast feed description. Go check it out if you're interested in those benefits or in supporting the show. Let's jump back in. All right, second topic here today. We're going to be talking about 5 interesting, weird Buildaround rares. I have trophied with all 5 of these cards, and they range from pretty normal cards that, you need a little bit of Buildaround to fairly unhinged, where your deck it's got to be doing the thing. So we're going to go in order, rough order of like the most normal to the ones that need the most work. With all of these, I'll show the deck that I trophy with on screen here. And we're going to start with Synthesizer Labship. I love this card, and this is a very normal card that you can put in pretty much any deck, but does have a few little things I like to include when I have this card. So this is the 1-mana rare spacecraft, the blue one, that at 2 counters on it, it gains the ability at the beginning of combat in your turn, up to 1 other artifact becomes a 2/2 flyer until end of turn, and at 9 counters it becomes a 4/4 flying vigilant creature. So the reason I say this card is kind of just fine in any deck is I think the floor of it, 1-mana 4/4 flying vigilant spacecraft that you get to sink 9 power into, that's just like not that bad, right? You play it on 1, you tap your 2-drop to it. On turn 3, maybe you have a 3 power creature, you put that into it. On turn 4, this thing's on already. So I'm very happy to take this early, and even if I don't end up in a super artifact heavy deck, which is pretty rare for me, like I've been saying, I've been drafting a lot of these kind of like artifact synergy decks, I'll still play it. But to really maximize on it, I do think you want to consider a few things. The obvious one, of course, is you want to have a lot of artifacts, and it's not necessary, of course, but it is pretty nice because you get to supercharge, kind of turbo out that 9 counter ability. Because kind of a non-obvious thing about this card is that even if you wake up something with summoning sickness, like for example, that 2 counters, you've got a melded Moxite in play, or like a Cryogen Relic, or just like any non-artifact creature, you can wake that thing up. Maybe it can't attack, maybe it can, but even if it can't attack, you can use the 2/2, the power and toughness, to sink it into the stationing, right? So you get to really power out that 4/4 flyer really quickly if you do have more artifacts, more trinkety things lying around. I really like a copy of Ilvoy Lightjammer when I've got the Synthesizer in my deck. This is the 2-mana artifact that comes in, gives something hexproof, and +1/+2. Equip cost of 3, but it auto-equips when it comes in. So often what'll happen when you have this card in the battlefield is the turn it's about to turn on, your opponent will often hold up mana. They're like, okay, like I'm kind of planning to answer this Labship when they go to wake it up. And this is like a pretty common play pattern for a lot of the spacecraft. But unlike a lot of the spacecraft, this play pattern, this kind of game state happens early in the game because this is a cheap spacecraft. A lot of times, like this scenario I'm talking about, where it's like, okay, like your opponent sees you're about to wake up the spacecraft, they leave up mana. Often that happens closer to like turn 6, 7, 8. But this is pretty reliably like a turn 4, turn 5 thing. And just having that jammer on that key turn, on that key mid-game turn, to blow like a grav killer or something can be awesome. Because not only do they waste their turn, you keep your creature around, you keep your spacecraft here, but now you've got a 5/6 Vigilant Flyer. And that's really, really difficult to deal with. Also, of course, after you've protected your creature, you could turn the jammer into a 2/2 flyer to get in one more point of damage than you would otherwise. Sometimes it's better to keep it as a 5/6 Vigilant Flyer. Sometimes it's better to push that additional point of damage. Up to your discretion, basically. Another card I really, really like in these decks when I have Labship is Scour from Scraps. This is the 4-mana instant. Choose one or both. Search your library for an artifact, put it into your hand, and search your graveyard for an artifact put into your hand. This just gives you some redundancy, some consistency, being able to search out your good rare, also being able to buy back your good rare. Also, it's really nice that while Scour from Scrap is a little bit expensive, right? It's 4 mana to not affect the board. You have a 1 mana thing that's pretty impactful that you want to go get. It also notably plays well with another rare, Tezzeret, Cruel Captain. This is the Planeswalker that one of its abilities is you can -3 and go search for an artifact with mana value 1 or less, put it into your hand. So, natural synergy there, of course. So yeah, like I said, we're starting easy here. This one does not take a lot of work. It's good in most blue decks. You don't have to put a lot of work in. But I do think if you have the protection spell and the ways to search it, you can get a little more oomph, make the card a little bit better than it would be in the average deck. Next up, we've got, honestly, one of the weirder cards we've seen in a while, Requiem Monolith. This is the 2 and a black artifact or rare. Has the ability tap until end of turn. Target creature gains whenever this creature deals damage. You draw that many cards and lose that much life. That creature controller may have this artifact deal 1 damage to it. Activate this only as a sorcery. I bet there are a lot of people that play this format pretty frequently who still don't know exactly what this card does, because it's a little bit weird. But basically, what it says is every turn you can target one of your own creatures to deal damage, draw a card. Of course, if that thing gets into combat and gets blocked, you'll draw more cards, lose more life. But the other side of things, where you might want to target your opponent's things with this card, is it can turn into a win condition, especially in black red. I think this is where the card is at its best, in black red, when you have burn spells. Because you target your opponent's creature, then you then cast like an Orbital Plunge, which steals 6. That damage gets dealt to their face, right? And sometimes, decking, you can deck them if their deck is smaller than their life total. That's a thing you can do too. When I first played this card, I just like horribly misplayed it because I had this combo where I actually missed lethal multiple times. I was streaming this game, and Mark Anderson, my side review partner Neo, he was watching the stream. He was in chat, and like it was early in the format, so I didn't even like completely know what all the cards did, or just had, didn't have a great feel for them. And like 3 times in chat, Mark was like, you missed lethal, you missed lethal, you missed lethal. And the thing that I was missing, I'm sure a lot of people are missing, is that line of like, all right, target my own stuff, draw a bunch of cards, and then eventually, after I've drawn a bunch of cards, start targeting my opponent's creatures with the Monolith so I can burn them out. So what do you want when you've got a Requiem Monolith in your deck? Well, generally, you're treating this as a sort of Phyrexian Arena, draw a card each turn, and you need creatures in your deck to be able to call it that. So baseline, I'm looking for like 14 creatures. Ideally, they have 2 or more toughness, so you're not just like sacrificing the creature to draw a card. But in some cases, it's actually a benefit to be able to kill your creature. So one of the obvious ones is Void, of course. If you want to turn on Void, kill your Virus Beetle or whatever with your Requiem Monolith, that does it. But the other situation that comes up pretty often, I find, is with Perigee Beckoner, right? So if I have Perigee Beckoner, again, coming up with Virus Beetle, I'll actually want to kill my Virus Beetle, and Requiem is kind of a sack outlet in that way. So you go Beckoner, warp it in, target the Beetle, Monolith the Beetle, you draw a card, they discard the card, you're very happy about all that. I would also really like a little bit of life gain in my deck to offset the life loss from the Monolith. You don't need a ton. Like, I'm sure if you face Monolith, you might have had this moment where you're like, okay, they played a Monolith. I don't think I can play a long game that well. They're going to outgrind me. But maybe them taking damage from this Monolith is going to be enough to, so I can sneak in damage. I can sneak in enough for lethal. And then they play a Dubious Delicacy. For example, the 3-mana artifact, -3, -3. They can sack it to gain 3 life. And you're like, okay, there goes that plan out the window. Or they have a Fel Labship, the life-linking spacecraft, and it's getting 1 hit, and it's like, even just gaining 3 life once often closes that window of like, well, maybe I can kill them with their own monolith. It's probably not going to happen. Another one I like, Delicacy and Labship, those are just like good cards. But I'll play a copy of Comet Crawler in this deck if I've got a monolith. This is the 3 mana, 2/3 lifelink. That whenever you attack, you can sack something and gets +2/+0. Not a card I love, but if I need a filler card, it's a fine filler card to pad out my life total for the monolith. And then, yeah, you're looking for, like I said, in red-black, ideally you have this card in red-black, you're looking for the things that deal a lot of damage. The burn spells that deal lots of big numbers to the opponent's creatures. So Orbital Plunge, the deal 6, that's a big one. We've also got Cup Repulsion, which is the instant 3 mana. Target creature deals damage to itself equal to its power. And if that creature had flying, it deals double that damage instead. So if you can kill a spacecraft, go like, target your kill ship with my monolith, Cup Repulsion, deal you 14. Like, that's pretty good. You can't always set that up. But Cup Repulsion is responsible for a lot of lethal turns. We've also got Pain for All, which is the aura that says when this enters, the enchanted creature deals its damage to any target. And then whenever the enchanted creature is dealt damage, you deal that much damage to target opponent. So kind of a cool little thing where, like, every turn you can ping the creature with the Pain for All and deal your opponent an extra point of damage. There's also Warmaker Gunship, the rare spacecraft in red, that comes in, deals damage equal to the number of artifacts you control to target creature, so that's responsible for a big number potentially. And then Pinnacle Killship, this is the easy one. This is just the deal 10 spacecraft. That'll end a lot of games. So yeah, we're still on the pretty hinge side of things as far as Buildarounds go. This card, you can kind of just play a Requiem Monolith in most black decks with a high enough creature count, but I do think it benefits from having that life gain, from being in black-red. I think that's a really big deal. Also, just a really hard card to play. Like, this card has not got a particularly great win rate on 17 lands. It's got something like a 55, 56 game in hand win rate percentage, and that maps to being like a C- or something, if you want to put it in like lower grade terms. And I do think the card's better than that. It's just a little bit difficult to use, so I think it's just probably a little bit underrepresented by the stats. Next up, we've got the Mythic land Adagia, Windswept Bastion. So this is the white Mythic station land. It's the planet. And at 12 counters, you get the ability 3 and a white, tap Adagia, create a token that's a copy of target artifact or enchantment you control, except it's legendary. Activate this only as a sorcery. So basically what this means is you activate this, you target let's say a Banishing Light, you get an extra copy of Banishing Light, but then you can't do it again, right? Because then you'll have 2 legendary permanents with the same name. By the way the legendary rule works is for you to have to sacrifice one of the cards. It's not just that you have cards of the same name, because otherwise this card wouldn't work. It's that you have 2 cards of the same name that are also legendary. So if you have a Banishing Light, that one's fine. That's never going to turn legendary. You make a copy, it becomes legendary. You can't now make another one, or else one of them has to go away. Specifically, the legend one has to go away. So this is a card that I think you can kind of make work in any color combination. It's especially nice, like any of these planet lands are nice if you have cards that care about being tapped. So for example, if you've got like a Nanoform Sentinel, it's the 3 mana blue creature that when it becomes tapped, it untaps something else. Or you've got like a Sammy in your deck, the red, white, gold card. Actually being able to tap things on command is kind of nice. Well, I'm pretty happy with this in any white deck. I think it's at its best in blue-white. I think blue just gives you some really nice artifacts to copy. Gives you some artifact creatures that are pretty nice to copy. One thing that is slightly not obvious, I suppose, is that normally this can't copy creatures, but if you have an artifact creature, of course, it can copy that. So let's start here in white, the cards I think you're looking for in white. So I talked about Banishing Light, 3 mana enchantment-based removal spell. That one's kind of obvious. There's also Rescue Skiff, which is the 6 mana spacecraft that reanimates something. So just being able to reanimate something every turn is pretty nice. In general, that's one of the things you're kind of looking for with Adagia is enter the battlefield effects. So that even if you're like, okay, well, I copied my one good thing, it becomes a legend, you still get value out of copying that good thing. There's also Auxiliary Boosters, which is the 5 mana equipment that the creature gets +1/+2. It also comes in with a 2/2 robot that you auto-equip to the boosters. Basically, you'll end up with 2 3/2 flyers, and then after the first one becomes legendary, you just start making a 2/2 token because you have to sack the actual boosters. And then a card that doesn't work, quote-unquote work with Adagia, you can't target it with Adagia, but I like when I have Adagia, is Night Luminary. So this is the 4 mana 3/2 in white that has warp for 2 mana, and when it enters, you make a 1/1 token. I mean, this is just a good white card. I want this in every one of my white decks, but it is really nice because it gives you a lot of power on just one card to be able to station. It also gives you multiple bodies, 3 bodies, which can be important because when you're going to activate your Adagia, when you're tapping blockers, it's nice to not be completely left open, right? Being able to go like, okay, I warp in my knight on turn 2, tap my 1/1, put a counter on Adagia. On turn 4, maybe you're under a little bit of pressure and you go like, tap my Luminary, tap the token I just made, chump block with that first 1/1 token. So it just gives you a little bit of time, buys you a little bit of time while providing a lot of power and toughness. And then the blue things I like with Adagia. So Cryogen Relic, you know, that's an easy one. It's actually kind of a benefit sometimes to make Cryogen Relic legendary, right? Because you go like, Adagia, copy my relic, I draw a card when it enters, and oops, oh, it's one's legendary, I guess I have to sack this one. You draw a card. You know, that does work the way you want it to. Specimen Freighter is a great thing to copy. This is the spacecraft that costs 6 mana that bounces 2 things. Another one I like quite a bit, Mechanizoa. This is the 6 mana 5/5 in blue with warp for 3. When it enters, you tap an artifact or creature your opponent controls and you put a stun counter on it. Not only is this a pretty good thing to copy at the top end, where you keep getting the tap thing down each turn, but it also provides a lot of power to be able to warp in and station Adagia on an earlier turn. Cryo Shatter is a pretty nice one too, the single blue mana aura that gives something -5, -0. This one's kind of interesting because, you know, obviously you can only do it twice, just like any of these enchantment-based removal spells, the second becomes legendary, but what you can do if you've got a Mechanizoa and a Cryo Shatter is you go, okay, one turn I'm going to copy my Cryo Shatter, put it on something my opponent controls, and then I copy my Mechanizoa that's going to tap the thing I've Cryo Shattered. Now I destroy it, Cryo Shatter goes to the grave, and I can do it all again, or I can get another Cryo Shatter. So you can kind of lock your opponent out in that way, if you've got Cryo Shatter and Mechanizoa with the active Adagia. Nanoform Sentinel, the blue 3/2 that when it becomes tapped, you untap another thing. So just this being an artifact creature, and also a card that I want in any deck that has tough station requirements, just as, you know, kind of a combo card in that way. In black, there's Dubious Delicacy, the -3/-3 artifact, and Monolith Circuit Feeder, the 6 mana 4/4 flying artifact creature that comes in, kill something based on the number of artifacts you control. In green, we've got Meltstrider's Resolve, the green aura that comes in and fights something. And use Social Engineering. This is a nice one. The 5 mana landfall, make it 2/2. Doubling up on that's pretty sweet. And another way you can lock the opponent out of the game is Pinnacle Killship. Just copying a deal 10, kill a creature each turn. That's a pretty good way to win a game. Next up on our list of weird Buildaround rares, and now we're getting to the kind of weird territory, is Terrasymbiosis. So this is the 2 and a green enchantment that says whenever you put a +1/+1 counter, one or more +1/+1 counters on a creature you control, you draw that many cards. Do this only once each turn. Super powerful card. Like, you can draw a lot of cards off this, but unlike the Monolith, unlike Adagia, unlike the Labship, this absolutely has to be in a deck that's doing the thing. So density is like the #1 thing I'm looking for. If you don't have the like 10 card bare minimum, I wouldn't even look Terrasymbiosis' way. If you can get to that number, it really helps to have cards that either put multiple counters on themselves at once or can do it repeatedly. And there's actually a lot of cards in this set that qualify for that. So let's talk about multiple counters at once. There's 2 X-Spell creatures that put counters on other creatures or themselves. One is a rare, the green-white rare, Diadrene. This is the X green-white's 0/1 trample that enters with X +1/+1 counters, where X is the number of mana you spent to cast it. Also has some other abilities in there too, but really just focusing on that. Like, I had a really funny game with this deck where I went turn 3 Terrasymbiosis, turn 4 Diadrene. I drew 4 cards, and my blue-black opponent just scooped on the spot. They're just like, I can't beat a 4/5, plus them being up 4 cards. So yeah, that's a really nice one. There's also Broodguard Elite, which is the X green 0/0 with warp for X and a green. It enters with X +1/+1 counters on it, and when it leaves, you put its counters on something else. Unfortunately, you can't get both the enters and leaves trigger because Terrasymbiosis says once per turn, but that's okay because it's an X spell, so you're going to be drawing a lot of cards off of it. You can, however, get multiple cards, a lot of cards over multiple turns, right? That is one thing. It's kind of nice. You warp it in one turn, get a lot of counters. The next turn, you just cast it, draw a lot more cards. So yeah, those are kind of the wombo combo cards. We've also got Halia, the green, white, gold card that puts counters on creatures repeatedly. We've got Intrepid Tenderfoot. This is the 2 mana 2/2 in green that you can pay 3 to put a counter on it. So just, pay 3, drawing a card is pretty good. Also got Dockworker Drone. This is the 2 mana 1/1 that enters with a counter. When it dies, you put its counter somewhere else. So if you've got a bunch of drones, you can kind of just keep juggling counters around, and you draw cards each time that happens. Or, at least the first time it happens on each of your turns. Rayblade Trooper is another pretty nice one. This is the 3 mana 2/2 in white with warp for 2 mana. When it enters, you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control, and then when something with a counter on it dies, you make a 1/1 token. So another thing that gives you 2 activations, right? Once when you warp it, and once when you cast it full retail. So yeah, this deck that I had it in, that I'm looking at right now, it was just, Terrasymbiosis was just fantastic in it. Like, every single time I saw it, it was just like, oh, great. Now, like, I didn't quite win on the spot, but I just drew it and I was like, oh, now I'm just in such a great position to win. I've got this Tenderfoot on the battlefield. I'm just going to keep sinking mana into it, draw a bunch of cards, draw into more cards with counters. So yeah, I would recommend, but again, really, really have to pay attention to that bare minimum 10 cards that put counters on cards. And ideally more than that, really. The more the merrier with Terrasymbiosis. Last Buildaround rare, and again, this is way on the deep end. You got to be going deep. Is weapons manufacturing. So this is the 1 in a red enchantment that says whenever a non-token artifact you control enters, create a colorless artifact token named Munitions. That token has the ability, when this token leaves the battlefield, it deals 2 damage to any target. So you need 2 things here. You need artifacts, a high density of artifacts. You also need quite a few ways to be able to sack those artifacts, right? And luckily, my favorite little 1-drop in this format, the Slag Drill Scrapper, happens to be an artifact that also helps you sack artifacts and also draw you cards at the same time, which draws you into more artifacts. So yeah, Slag Drill Scrapper, I think, is like the #1 card I want with weapons manufacturing. And just like Terrasymbiosis, I think you need to have a density of artifacts too. Something in that same range as Terrasymbiosis, where it's like 10, 11, something like that. You gotta trigger weapons manufacturing at least, I'd say, 3 times before you're really happy with it, and have ways to sack it too. So yeah, on to cards that you're really looking for. Slag Drill Scrapper. This has to be #1, I think, just qualifying for both things you're looking for. But #2 is probably Umbral Caller Zealot. This is the 2-mana 3/2 in black that you can sack a creature or artifact to surveil 1. So does a pretty similar thing. Is not an artifact, but gives you a sack outlet. And the really nice thing about this is not a once per turn. So what you can do is you can really just stockpile your munitions and then be like, oh, I've got 4 of them, send them to your face all at once. You're at 8, you die. Just like the Scrapper, it also helps you find more ways to trigger your munitions. So yeah, those are like #1, #2. I would play, kind of as many copies as I could get of both these cards. Embrace Oblivion is another pretty good thing to pair with munitions. This is the single black mana, sack a thing to kill a creature or a spacecraft. If you really need to, like, you're like, okay, I tried to draft this weapon manufacturing deck and it didn't really come together. You can play Comet Crawler, which is the 3-mana lifelinking 2/3 that you can sack something when it attacks. Or Swarm Color. This is the 4-mana 2/4. Whenever it becomes tapped, you can sack a creature or artifact if you draw a card. I would prefer not to play these. Like, #1, they're not artifacts, which you really kind of want. #2, I think these creatures are just kind of mid in general. So yeah, they're fine sack outlets if you really, really need them. I'm looking for, I would say, I don't know, something in the neighborhood of like 6, 7 sack outlets for the manufacturing to really make it tick. So if you're below that, I might play a Swarm Color or a Comet Crawler. Past that, some other cards I like in this deck. So #1, Melded Moxite, the 2-mana discard a card and draw 2 cards artifact. This is, again, kind of just an artifact that triggers your weapons manufacturing, but also digs you 2 more artifacts. I also like Oreplate Pangolin. This is the 2-mana 2/2 artifact creature that when an artifact enters, you can pay 1. And if you do, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. So with manufacturing in play, you can just, really start to turbocharge this Pangolin. Basically, every artifact you play is responsible for 2 +1/+1 counters. And just like having a threat, you need some threats that are going to deal combat damage the first 10, 12 points or so. And Pangolin's a pretty good thing in this deck. Just if you have enough artifacts, grows pretty quickly. Sometimes grows double if you've got the manufacturing on the battlefield. And then this is really, going deep. If you really want to get lost in the sauce here, Memorial Vault is the 4-mana rare artifact in red that you can tap it, sack an artifact, exile the top X cards of your library, where X is 1 plus the mana value of the sacked artifact. You can play those cards this turn. So it kind of fills the role of the Slag Drill Scrapper, where it's an artifact that also sacks other artifacts. And then one more level of spice. For those who are really spicy, we've got Ragos, Deft Gastronaut. This is the red-white. So yes, we're adding another color here. Red-white 2/2 rare that says artifacts you control are food in addition to their other types. They have tap sack, gain 3 life. You also pay 1, tap Ragos, sack a food, deal 3 damage to each opponent. So this gives your munitions tokens a way to sacrifice themselves, but also just going Ragos, sack a munitions token, you can deal 5 damage. You kill your opponent very, very quickly with this card. Anyways, yeah, out of the bunch, I think this is the one that is the trickiest to get together because it needs some specific pieces, also needs a density of sack outlets and artifacts. I've only successfully done it once, a single time. And the deck was pretty good. I think I got to about 5 wins. But yeah, those Scrappers, those Zealots, those are really the key. Anyways, we're going to pack it up from here. Thanks for watching and listening, everybody. I am kind of in a middle space right now between going to some Evergreen content, maybe touching on Edge of Eternities next week again. I'm unsure. Let me know what you want to hear. I get the vibe that this is just a less popular set in general. for a lot of people. I know a lot of people aren't super tuned into Edge of Eternities content, but if you want to hear more, I'm happy to talk about it. Like I said, I've been really enjoying this format. If not, if you want to hear some evergreen stuff, some set agnostic level up episodes, I'm very happy to do that too. Let me know. Leave it in the comments. If you made it this far, go check out that Patreon, or another way you can help with the channel is just a like, a subscribe, a comment. All that stuff's great. Thank you for watching and listening, everybody. We'll see you next time.